knitters, I'm going to show you today how to create a swatch in the round for my swatching class. Starting off with a number of stitches cast on. I've got 25 because my projected gauge or tension should be 14. So I've added a few extras so that I can measure 14 in the center afterwards. So cast on normally and then knit the first row as usual. And I'll meet you back here in a sec. Okay, once we've knit the first row, and here is my both my tail and my working yarn on this end. What I have to do is actually drag these stitches all the way to the other end of my circular needle and push them on that way so that my tail and my working yarn is on this side. And then we drape that yarn at the back nice and loose and hold it steady and start knitting again from the other side. So the knit side is still facing you and you're going to knit again, but you've draped this yarn at the back. Okay, this is so that you can always keep the right side facing and you're only knitting and no purling, and it's supposed to mimic working in the round. And we'll just do that again. So you finish the row, the working yarn is here. I'm going to drape it to the other side. Just, drag the stitches to the other end of your circular needle. Drape it across the back like a big long float and start knitting again from this end. Okay, and I'm going to keep doing that until I've got quite a few rows so I can measure my row gauge as well. I'll meet you back here when that's done. Okie dokie, I have knit 6 inches in length, so now I'll be able to measure my row gauge as well as my stitch gauge. This I've left the wool yarn still attached because I'm going to have a look at my gauge on my unblocked, unwashed swatch first and decide whether or not it fits purpose. And if I get a good gauge and I'm happy with the fabric, then I'll later cut it and wash, block it, remeasure it. But it's a good idea to take a measurement before you wash and block it so that you know what it's going to do and how it behaves. So when you go to knit your actual project, you can compare something to it. And I'll just show you the back. So this is how the strands look at the back that I showed you before. As you drape it across and then start knitting, you're only knitting, even though you're doing it in the round, so there's no purling involved at all. And that's what mimics knitting in the round, which is perfect. So now let's measure this gauge. I'm going to have a look with my ruler. It is curling around a little bit, as you can see. Maybe some of these were a little bit tight, but that's okay because after I've washed and blocked it, I can, if I don't need the yarn, cut these and so that I can lay it more flat. But this is plenty of stitches to be able to measure from, so I'm okay with that curling a little bit. And I was just going to also mention before I start measuring that these lines here can be really messy when you first finish, and what I do is just you can tidy them up. You don't have to, but I just like to tidy them up a little bit so that it's not so wibbly wobbly, but it is totally normal for these edges not to be straight because you've just got these loose strands, so there's no wonder. Okay, so it's okay, that's normal. All right, so let's flip it and measure. I'll put my pin in away from the edge so that I've got some nice straight stitches to measure from. And I'm going to use a ruler, not a tape measure. It's recommended that you use a ruler because it's nice and straight. You don't have to worry about a tape measure being wobbly or stretching out or anything like that. So we're measuring on a hard surface, not on your leg when you're knitting in the dark at night. I've done that before. It doesn't work. Much better to put it on a table on a nice flat surface. Let's stick our pin in at the beginning, measure 4 inches, and then pop another pin in here like that. And now let's just see, so I've got 4 inches, and now I can count the number of stitches between my pins. Now you'll note I am using inches, even though I'm from Australia and we use the metric system here. I find that with knitting gauge, using inches makes a little bit more sense, only because an inch is bigger than a centimetre, obviously, and you get a few more stitches per inch, so you can find your stitch gauge, stitches per inch gauge, and then do sweater maths a little bit easier, I think, when you're using inches rather than centimeters. Anyway, okay, so let's count how many stitches we have between the pins. What I'm counting here, you can see there's columns, straight vertical columns of stitches, and each one they're V's stacked on top of each other to make that column. Can you, if you're a beginner, you might find that hard to see, but seasoned knitters will know what I'm talking about. Anyway, let's count. So I'm counting the center of the V. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And 14 stitches is exactly what I was targeting. So now that I'm happy with my stitch gauge, I'm going to be able to cut this, wash block it, remeasure it, and see if it maintains that stitch gauge. This yarn is a wool alpaca acrylic blend, so the alpaca could cause stretching out. It's quite floppy, so it's something to be aware of to see if there's any change afterwards. If anywhere, it might change more in the row gauge. While we're at it, let's have a look at row gauge, shall we? So sometimes you can get really cool gauge rulers that have got a square. They're great for measuring row and stitch gauge, but I don't have one, so I'm just going to go with my ruler. I like using T-pins. You don't have to, you can use ordinary pins, I suppose, but T-pins sort of stand out more and they feel like they don't get lost in your work. Again, I'm just going to measure, I thought I needed 6 inches. It's not quite. That's fine. That would do. I'm going to pick a spot. I'm going to look for a complete stitch. So I'm going to go from the top of the V, or the bottom of the previous one, but I'm going to say that that's the top of this stitch here. I put my ruler there. It keeps moving. Let's just do this. And this is the gauge that I'll probably look out for after I've washed and blocked it, because of the alpaca, it might stretch. It's also machine washable yarn, so that means it's super wash, which could have an effect as well. Okay, so there's 4 inches and I'm putting my pin there. I'll just measure again when I take it away. So there we go. All right. Now, oops, caught. Just, oh. Push them right in so I don't lose them. And I'm going to use my pointer to do it. So I'm going to go with this as being my first stitch. Should I zoom? Let's see if I can zoom. Oh yeah, nice. So there is my first one. Okay, so I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm off camera, I'll just unzoom. 16, 17, 18, 19. Let's see, where's that? Do I count that full stitch? 18, 19, 18 and a half maybe. Yeah. Okay, so now I'll take a note of those measurements and then wash and block and re-measure to see what happens to it. Great. Okay, now it's time to block our swatch. I have just got some hot water in a bowl here. It is hot, a little, it's hand hot, not boiling water or anything like that, but it is hand hot because I want the yarn to clean, and it's how I will treat my final project. It's also machine washable yarn, so I'm not too concerned about it. I'm using a little bit of soak. I've got yuzu flavored, which is smelling delicious. You can't smell that. So here's my swatch. I'm going to pop it into the water and just push it down so that it gets completely saturated. I'm not going to do anything other than just make it soak into all the fiber there. So now I'm going to get my swatch out of the water. I should have said before as well, this is a no rinse wool wash, so I don't need to rinse this afterwards. I'm just going to squeeze out the water like that and move this out of the way, and then I'll grab a towel. So if it was a big jumper or something like that, I would get the biggest beach towel that I have and actually put it on the floor or something. But as it's only a small swatch, I'm just using a hand towel, and I'm going to lay it flat on the hand towel and then fold it up and roll it up and then give it a squeeze like this. I'm not wringing, I'm just squeezing, and some more of that water will come out. And let's have a look. Give it a little shake to fluff it back up again. And the next thing I will do is actually literally just leave it to dry. I tend to use my blocking mats to dry things. I'm not going to pin it. I don't want to pin this swatch. I don't want to distort the way that it dries or anything like that. If this was a lace shawl, then absolutely I would pin the lace out so that it looked beautiful, but this is going to be for a sweater, so I really don't want to affect the gauge by stretching it or anything like that. So I'm just going to leave it to dry on an airer preferably rather than on a mat, so that air goes underneath and it dries faster. Okay, we're back with a dry swatch. I can now measure to see if anything's changed with our gauge. I'm just going to put our first pin, do the 4 inches. There we go. Take that away and count our stitches between our pins again. Whoops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's the same, exactly the same. That's good. It's possibly to be expected with the acrylic content in the yarn. Acrylic tends not to change much with blocking. Right, we'll have a look at the row gauge now. Let's put a pin in at the top here. So our row gauge when it was wet, well, sorry, before blocking was 18.5. So let's see what it is now. Okay. I'll count this. Let's just zoom there. Move that slightly. So I'm going to go from that V there. So that's why I've got the measure at the top of it like that. Try to line up the ruler so that that row column is straight. And our 4 inches. Okay. So I use my needle as a pointer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.5. Yeah, same. Nothing's changed. So that's positive result. Looks beautiful and smooth now that it's been blocked. And the next thing it would be to assess the fabric to see if we like it. So it is quite a holey fabric, so I would use it for something drapey, like maybe a cardigan or something. If I was to make a jumper or something that needed more structure, I might go one size smaller, to be honest. It really depends on what you want to achieve with your finished project. But 14 stitches is what I was going for, and it's what I got. So there you go. Now you can do sweater maths. Okay, time to do the sweater maths. I'm using this little jumper as our example, and I wanted to show you that when I measure the gauge of this little jumper, I get 13.5 stitches per 4 inches as compared to the 14 stitches per 4 inches I got on my swatch that I did in the round. This jumper is knit in the round from the top down, and the magic number that we're looking for, that I talk about in my class, is this number here. So it's the number of stitches that you're left with after you split for sleeves. Okay, so in this case it's 80 stitches. 80 stitches including the underarm stitches and the body stitches back and front. It's 80 stitches. So if we're going to have a look and see how this jumper would turn out with this yarn instead at this gauge on a 6.5mm needle. This was Pepin 14 and this is Grange 14, the smaller one that I swatched with. So let's take a look. So here's some maths that I did earlier. The little sweater has a gauge of 13.5 stitches per 4 inches, which gives us a gauge of 3.375 stitches per 1 inch. So 13.5 divided by 4 is 3.375. Now, that's pretty granular. And we're only using this as an example. You might need to not go that far. Particularly with a small garment, it's not going to make a great deal of difference, but people say, oh, what's 1 stitch over 4 inches? Is that going to make much difference? Well, this is going to show you how it does make a difference. So our gauge on the sample here on our swatch was 14 stitches per 4 inches. It's only half a stitch different over 4 inches. And that gives us a gauge of 3.5 stitches per 1 inch. So very similar. And you might think, no big deal. Okay, so let's have a look. 80 stitches, which is the body circumference or the bust circumference, depending on what you're making, at 3.375 stitches per inch. So it's 80 divided by 3.375 comes to 23.7 inches. So that is the circumference in inches of the little jumper. And for us metric folk, let's turn that into centimetres, multiplied by 2.54. I'm using a calculator off screen here. So that comes to 60.198 centimetres. So 60 centimetres-ish of a little jumper, okay? So now let's use our 14 stitches per 4 inches gauge. So 80 divided by 3.5 stitches per 1 inch equals 22.857 inches. So there is a little bit of a difference. It's not a great deal, and on a kid's jumper, that's fine. It's really not much at all, but it's nearly an inch. So you think, okay, either one will be fine. It's still going to fit. But if we're doing an adult size jumper, let's say we have 160 stitches to play with instead. Let's see what kind of a difference it makes now. So 160 divided by 3.375 equals 47.4 inches. And 160 stitches at 3.5 stitches, which is the Grange gauge, comes to 45.71 inches. So now we're looking at a couple of inches difference. Now that on a garment can be significant. It depends on how tight or loose you want it to be. So taking into account that ease, which is what we call how tight or loose the jumper is, you could really get a completely too big or too small garment when you're calculating it over a larger size. So for a kid's jumper, not so much, but for an adult one, definitely worth thinking about either changing needle size or yarn I just wanted to finish by mentioning how to adjust our gauge. So usually from a pattern, we'll have a measurement in mind that we want to knit, and we'll be working backwards from there. If you did want to match the size and the fabric exactly that the designer wants, then how do we fix it? You knit a swatch. You're 1 stitch off the gauge required for the 4 inches. So what do we do? Well, if you have 1 stitch too many, you need to make your fabric looser and your gauge bigger. So you need to go up a needle size. Going up a needle size will give you fewer stitches per inch. The opposite is true if, in our example, if we have 1 stitch or half a stitch too few. We need to make our gauge smaller and our fabric tighter so that we can fit more stitches into 4 inches. So we need to, in that case, go down a needle size. So for this example, in the green fabric, if we want that fabric to match this grey fabric, we would go down. So I knit this on a 6.5mm needle. Our only option is to go down a half a size to a 6mm. So we'll just make another swatch and see if that gives you the target gauge. There's many reasons to swatch, so I highly recommend getting your needles out and having a go. Good luck. Bye.